Dixon, baseball historian, with another edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. This is the December 8th, 2025 edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. And once again, I've been struggling with this cold here for about a week and a half, but I'm going to make it through this broadcast. But I do want to say, if you like what I'm doing and you follow me before, or you listen to me before, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Stay with me. We're new to this format, and this is probably about our fourth month. I think I started back in August. And so we're growing, and I'm just dropping a lot of history, guys. Now, what I do is I give you a fact that happened on this day in Black baseball history, and it involves somebody who played baseball. Now, the interesting thing about some of my facts are that the baseball player may not be playing baseball, might be playing football or basketball or another sport. But I'm going to give you interesting information that you can't get anywhere else. And this, excuse me, this information comes from my more than 45 years as a baseball historian. I'm actually about to go on 46, if you can imagine that, that I've been doing it this long and has really garnered a lot of attention. So, guys, if you like the work also, in addition to subscribing, you can go and look at some of my books. I have books, and once again, I have award-winning books. So they're just not books. They're award-winning books that tell the history of these great men in baseball. So I'm going to wait probably about 2 minutes, and then I'm just going to jump right in here with the facts, and then people typically join in. I know it's a Monday night. Maybe you had a busy day with activities on Monday. But anyway, we're going to jump in here and have a good time today. All right, let's go to our first fact. And we're going to go to December the 8th, 1936. Led by Negro leaguer Zachariah Zach Clayton at forward and William Bill Yancey at guard, the New York Reds defeated Mount Carmel Lyceum at Mount Carmel Hall in Jersey City, New Jersey, in a 31-28 basketball final. Now, I don't know if you know much about Zach Clayton, but I'm going to educate you right now in case you don't know who Zach Clayton is. And this is important history because I always use the example, when I was growing up, the players that they talked about, I knew about George Mikan, but I never knew about Buck Clayton. Of course, I never heard about Fats Jenkins or Bill Yancey or Cumberland Posey, all fantastic basketball players. Just never heard of them. So let me tell you, some of these guys were doing a lot of great things, and we should have known about them. So I'm going to make sure that you know now, all right? So I'm educating you. Okay, so now Clayton was born April 17th in Virginia, okay? And he served, how about this? You probably remember the Rumble in the Jungle? The fight between Muhammad Ali and who else? Somebody knows the answer to this. Who was the other fighter? Okay, somebody. I'm waiting for somebody. Okay, well, you'll see if anybody can pick this up. All right. So that was a heavyweight championship bout, and he served as the referee. Now, this is a guy who played basketball, but he also played baseball too. But later on, he's a referee in a boxing match. That means he also boxed somewhere along the way and knew the rules of boxing as well. Okay, so he was a referee in the Rumble from the Jungle, and that was, I'm waiting for somebody to put in here, somebody knows. And by the way, if anyone's joining me, you should also put in the state or the city from where you're joining me. That's always more interesting, and I'll give you a shout out. And if I know something about that area, I will also talk about it here. Okay, so here we go. I'm still waiting for someone to tell me who was the other fighter in the Rumble from the Jungle. It was Muhammad Ali, but it's somebody else. All right, somebody joining me from Indianapolis, Indiana. That's a great city. I've been there a couple of times. Somebody from Kentucky. I don't know if I've ever presented in Kentucky, but I definitely, there was a show on PBS called History Detective, and we filmed that particular show in Indianapolis. Okay, somebody said it joined me from Chile. All right. Now, Muhammad Ali was one of the fighters in the Rumble from the Jungle, but who was the other guy? Most people would know Muhammad Ali, maybe a few less. There we go. Somebody said George Foreman. That is correct. So, yeah, so Zach Clayton was the referee in that bout. Okay, now guess what? This guy also was the referee in Ali's bout against Trevor Berbick. I don't know if you remember that fight. And that occurred December 11th, 1981. And I think that was close to Muhammad Ali's last fight. No, it wasn't Joe Frazier, but that's a good guess. All right, somebody from Tennessee. Nashville is one of my favorite cities because I talk about a lot of players from there, especially. So who is this? Okay, and then Zach Clayton today is a member of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. So this is somebody that you would need to know. And once again, I try to tell people that when I was growing up, I knew about George Mikan because that was the information they were pumping to me. I knew about Bob Cousy, but there were a lot of guys I just didn't know about because they weren't in the books. So these guys are not going to be household names, but they're important names in history of sports in America. All right, and I will live. The last thing I'll give you on Clayton, he played for the Baltimore Elite Giants, played for the New York Black Yankees, the Chicago American Giants, and the Bacharach Giants of Philadelphia in a baseball career that lasted from 1931 to 1945. But how about this? He's not in the Baseball Hall of Fame, but he's in Cooperstown. No, he's not Cooperstown, but he's in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Yeah, I wish we could get him into Cooperstown. But he should be in the Boxing Hall of Fame. I think I might check with them as well. They're up close to where Cooperstown is. I've been wanting to get there every time I go to that part of the country. Just haven't made it yet. Okay, so all right. So let's go to another one. That was my fact for December 8th, 1936. And guys, if you like what I'm doing, go ahead and hit that subscription button. Okay, so we got people joining here. Pre-show by James Brown. Not sure what that means. All right, so let's go to another one. All right, December 8th, 1962. Okay, pitching sensation William Miller Gatewood. Most people know him as Bill Gatewood. He died in Columbia, Missouri. And in the mid-80s, now I will say this, he did not live in Columbia, Missouri. He lived in Moberly, Missouri. But if you live in these small rural communities outside of the major towns, usually there's not a major hospital in your town. So most people who lived in Moberly and Centralia and those areas around there, Boonville, they would go to Columbia if they got sick and had to go to the hospital. And so that's where he passed away. So that's the reason why Columbia, Missouri, not Moberly, Missouri, where he lived, is his place of death. Now, in the mid-'80s, he had three sons. And they were living in St. Louis. Now, the reason I know this, because I interviewed Jimmy Crutchfield. Jimmy Crutchfield was a big booster of mine. And we talked often. I have a thick file of just conversation I had with Crutchfield. And so Crutchfield was living in Chicago, and he played for Bill Gatewood. And Bill Gatewood actually was the one who sent him to the Birmingham Black Barons in 1930, 31, right in there, to start his Negro League career. So he was quite fond, and he knew Bill Gatewood quite a bit. Now, also, I might mention every once in a while when you interview players, they will give you some strange information. And sometimes they have to take back information they said. And so what I would do is when I would interview players, if I had a written interview, I would have that interview written down, and I'm looking at it as I'm asking you the same questions over. So I remember asking Crutchfield about Gatewood's wife. And he said that Gate was from Texas, but he married a wife, and they got married in Mobile. And the first time I talked to him, he said she was a nurse. And he said they settled in Moberly in 1928. Now, another time I talked to him, he said she was a school teacher. And so she could have been a nurse and a school teacher, or she could have been one or the other. I never could figure that out. But I had both of those notes in interviews that I had from Mr. Crutchfield. Also, let's see what I want to say. Okay, and then there's two famous guys that Gatewood was responsible for getting to the Negro Leagues from Moberly, Missouri. One of them is Jimmy Crutchfield, and Jimmy Crutchfield was like 5'7", little guy. And when he got down to Birmingham, manager didn't want to give him a tryout because he said, "Hey, you're too little." And but the manager said, "Hey, if Bill Gatewood sent you here, you must be able to do something." And by opening day, Jimmy Crutchfield was the Birmingham Black Barons' starting center fielder, and all on the name of Crutchfield. I mean, excuse me, of Bill Gatewood. Did Crutchfield get that opportunity? All right, another player he had that was a guy named Leroy Matlock. And I don't know if you know him. He ended up playing for the Pittsburgh Crawfords. Was a good pitcher too. And I remember a couple of things. Now, sometimes when you're doing this information, you're able to lock in certain things. So I know that Matlock died on April the 6th, 1968. And the way I always lock that in, first of all, Martin Luther King was assassinated on April the 4th, 1968. So I know they died the same year. And then when I was talking to Jimmy Crutchfield, he was the first that gave me that reference. So whenever I'm talking about Matlock, I use that reference in my mind to always remember when he passed away. And I'm going to give you another one later on, and as I talk about this, that I'm also submitted to memory, and no matter where I am, I can always remember this. And there's lots of things that I submit to memory that way. And people say, "How do you remember all this stuff?" And it's association. That's kind of what I do. And by the way, now let me know where you're from. All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to answer this question. Somebody said, "Have you ever talked about anything other than blacks?" Well, of course I do. I've talked to a lot of Major League Baseball players who were not African American. But my specialty here is being able to talk about the Negro Leagues that in a way that no one else in this country can talk about it. Because I've sat with it and I learned from the men, and I specialized in this. And I've always loved baseball. So I talked to every baseball player. Actually, Hank Bauer, who used to be the manager of the Baltimore Orioles, played with the Kansas City Athletics, played with the New York Yankees, was one of my favorite people. Used to talk to him all the time. Had a great time. But I've interviewed scores of white players. But some of the white players gave me good information about the black players. How about that? So I get my information from whoever has it. But there are channels that specialize in that. What I do is try to give you attention and focus on African American baseball players. And I guarantee you, the people I'm talking about today, Zach Clayton, and I just went through one actually, Zach Clayton. You probably never heard of Bill Gatewood before, Leroy Matlock, Jimmy Crutchfield. I don't know how much you know about these particular guys, but these are people that need to be talked about. And this is the place you can get that information. All right. Okay. So we went through Bill Gatewood, and so we got through Bill Gatewood. Okay. So let's go about this one. December the 8th, 1986, the Kansas City Royals signed free agent Rudy Law, who had previously played with the Dodgers and White Sox. During his career, he stole 79 bases in the minors during the 1978 season, then added 77 swipes with the White Sox in 1983. The reason I put this one in here, years ago, I went down to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I went down there specifically to see the Albuquerque Dukes. And the Albuquerque Dukes had a great team. Rudy was on that team. Who was on there? A guy named Joe Simpson. I think Joe later played for the Kansas City Monarchs too. But and then whoever the guy is, Joe Simpson was a white guy. But anyway, he was on the team. Pedro Guerrero was on the team, and Jeffrey Leonard, I think, was on the team. The Dodgers had a great AAA minor league team in Albuquerque, and I wanted to go down and see them. So somewhere I have that information, and I remember Rudy Law's batting stance because he was real stretched out. His legs were far apart, and way in the back of the box. And so I remember him. So I had a chance to see him play. Never did interview him, but I did get a chance to see him play along with a lot of great Dodgers who came up. Bob Welch was down at the Dodgers at that time. Of course, you know, he had that great battle against Reggie Jackson in the World Series. Somebody remembers that too. All right. So, okay. So just want to mention that. Let's see. And then we have a couple other ones here. Sean Dunston is signed by the National League Giants as a free agent. This guy was originally a first round pick for the National League clubs in the amateur draft. And so he was signed as a free agent December 8th, 2000. And then how about this? Alfredo Griffin is acquired from Toronto's American League Blue Jays along with Dave Collins in exchange for Bill Caldrill of the Oakland Athletics. I remember when I worked for the Royals, I was assistant director of PR, and I remember, you know, the ball players used to arrive at the park for a night game about 2 o'clock. And I remember I had to go somewhere, so I walked out the stadium. I think I went to the Adams Mark Hotel to do something, and I was coming back, and I saw Alfredo Griffin. He was walking too, and I remember asking him, "Hey, why you walking?" You know, and he said, "I missed the team bus." So he walked from the hotel to back to the ballpark, and I just happened to see him and recognized him, and went from there. So yeah, so I remember Alfredo Griffin as well. So, and this guy, if you look it up, this guy was signed is a very young player. They were signing guys that 13 and 14 years old from Puerto Rico. And I think Griffin was one of those guys. He might have signed at 14 or 15 years old. So check that out, somebody. And we go from there. And then somebody put in here, let's see, Mr. Dixon, I got to meet Reverend Bill Gleason. Greason is his name, at Rickwood Field at an NBL game. Yep, he was with the Marines on Iwo Jima, 101 years old, Birmingham Black Barons too. Played with Willie Mays. Yes, I have pictures with myself and Bill Greason. Met him on several occasions, and great guy, great guy. And he broke the color barrier in the Southern, let's see, yeah, it was the Southern League. No, Texas League. The Texas League with Oklahoma City, I think it was 1951. I think I wrote about that in one of my books, The Dizzy and Daffy Dean Barnstorming Tour, Race, Media, and America's National Pastime. Let me see if I can get them. Okay, so let me go ahead and close with one more. All right, so we got a little basketball here. We got Bill Gatewood, got the Kansas City Royals. All right, here we go. This is the last one for today. Usually I do a coming and a going. That's somebody who was born or passed away on this date. And so let me give you who I'm going to talk about today. His name is Hank Thompson. You ever heard of Hank Thompson? Uh-huh. All right. Well, Hank Thompson is born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And he was a former Kansas City Monarchs. And he signed with the St. Louis Browns. And at the same time, Willie Brown also signed the same day, who was an African American. But Thompson gets on the field first. So he becomes the first black player to play for the St. Louis Browns. Well, he didn't stick with the Browns. That was in 47. So he was returned back to the Monarchs. And then later on, he ended up breaking the color barrier and being the first black player to sign with the New York Giants, who are the San Francisco Giants now, but they were in New York then. So this guy broke the color barrier on two teams, one in the American League and one in the National League. So even that's a distinction that should make him great. But you know, if you ever read about Hank Thompson, he was he was troubled a little bit. Now the story I'm going to tell you comes from Connie Johnson. Connie Johnson was with a member of the Kansas City Monarchs when Hank was there, and also Connie Johnson. He's featured in various baseball card sets on top sets. Pitching for the Baltimore Orioles and the Chicago White Sox. So this story comes from Connie Johnson. Now, reportedly, what Connie told me was in 1947, the Kansas City Monarchs were playing in St. Joseph, Missouri, and they were playing the Indianapolis Clowns, and something happened. I can't remember what happened, but they ended up having a fight on the field. And so the Kansas City, they were going to play the next day, I think in Kansas City or somewhere. And so the Kansas City Monarchs, several of them went down and bought weapons. So they got some pistols, and they, in case some trouble broke out, they weren't going to be victims. Somebody else was going to be victimized. So anyway, this is a story Connie Johnson told me, and he said eventually, he said nothing happened, and they got rid of their guns. He said, but Hank kept his, and so, and Hank ended up going back to Dallas, where he had grown up. Now he wasn't born in Dallas, but that's where he had grown up, and he got into an argument with a guy by the name of James Crow. Now you know what the reason I remember that, because Jim Crow. I'm thinking about Jim Crow and James Crow, so I always remember that guy's name, right? And so, but the guy's nickname was Bud. Bud, and they had played baseball together, and Hank Thompson knew that this guy was a pretty tough character. So they got in an argument, and Bud threatened him, and anyway, Hank shot him and killed him. And so that followed Hank through his entire career. And the story that I'm giving you now, you can go online, look up the story. There's lots of information on this story. But the story was that you don't get is how they bought the weapon. And I will tell you this, Hank Thompson was a World War II veteran, and he had been at the Battle of the Bulge. So he knew how to handle a weapon. So if he picked up a weapon and started shooting, he probably wasn't going to miss. And that was the unfortunate demise of James Crow. All right, I bet you remember that now too. James Crow, it was the one that was shot by Hank Thompson. And you remember Leroy Matlock died 2 days after Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, April 4th. Leroy Matlock, April 6th, St. Paul, Minnesota. So guys, that's what I do. I've been out speaking on this topic for many years, and people say, how do you remember all these things? Well, first of all, I did a number of interviews. Let me get a drink of water. I estimate that I've done over 500 interviews of different people. And of course, as a kid, I was a collector. And I collected baseball cards. Actually, I want to show you just a couple of things as I get out of here, because I was a big Hank Thompson fan. And so I went back, and I was able to get all of my cards now protected. So here's Hank Thompson 51? 51, those were the tops. Okay, this is the redbacks. They had another set too. Here's a 1954 Hank Thompson there. They're kind of glistening there. There you go. And how about this one? This is a 1952 Hank Thompson. Hank Thompson. Yeah, he's a good ball player, for real, man, for real. Here's 1953 Hank Thompson. And I do have a few of his other cards that aren't Topps cards, by the way. And then also, I have an image here. I just show it to you. A picture of Leroy Matlock. Leroy Matlock here, kind of rare print of him. The guy I talked about from Moberly. And also, when I talked about Bill Gatewood, when he came to Moberly, first of all, he managed a team called the Moberly Eagles. And that's who Jimmy Crutchfield was playing for at first. But later on, they started a team called the Gatewood Browns. And the Gatewood Browns was the name of the team. And I was able to interview Mr. Brown. Now, Mr. Brown was the part owner of the team. So you had Bill Gatewood, and then you had Mr. Brown. And this is a letter that he wrote me on Lodge Stationery. And it is dated. Let me see. I think I even have the envelope. Whenever I used to get letters, I would always keep the envelope. So the envelope is dated 1984. Guys, what were you doing in 1984? I can tell you what I was doing. I was doing this research. And you wonder why I'm talking about these guys today? Because I can talk about them in ways that no one else can. And guess what? There's a lot of people who are giving you history on the Negro Leagues, and people who were never went to a ball player's house, and you know, I would go to church with these guys, and they knew I was the real deal, and I knew they were the real deal, and because of that, guys, we've been working together. They gave me the history. They talked about it as long as they could, and then they began to get some media at the end of their lives. that they didn't get. And part of that was through my efforts, and not just me alone, but certainly my efforts. And today, guys, we're looking at a whole different time of in history. But it can be better if we continue to talk about these subjects, guys. So if you enjoy what I'm doing, guys, if you pick this broadcast up later, or if you just stayed a minute to 5 minutes or whatever, I appreciate that. And I would love you to follow me and subscribe. And I'm going to say a couple of things as I get out of here. Somebody said, from a snowy St. Paul, it can get cold up there. Uh, I presented in St. Paul before, and it was in February. So one of these times I have to tell you about I spoke in Sioux Falls, South Dakota in February and got caught in a blizzard coming back to Kansas City. Okay, somebody says nice cards. They are nice cards. One of these days I'm going to pull out some of these cards and show you some of the things that I've collected over the years. And then let's see. Somebody said they weren't alive in '84. I was born in 2009. Hey, guess what? That's one of the reasons why you might enjoy this broadcast. Now, guys, I have a subscription to the Baseball Network. And so MLB Network, I'm listening to it all the time. But I can tell you guys, I have more fun giving you this information than I ever have listening to those guys talking about some $1 million player, a guy who can throw over 100 miles per hour, can't get anybody out. And, you know, we have fun here. But this is real baseball history. And this is history of men who made baseball famous. So I want to thank you guys for joining me for tonight. And this was a December 8th, 2025 edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. Come back and join me again. And whenever you pop in here, always let me know what state you're from. And I think I got everybody else. Somebody said, Hank Machine Gun Thompson. Hey, okay. All right. I think I got everybody who was who actually had some good things to say. Somebody mentioned Coup Papa Bell. I didn't know Coup Papa Bell very well. And if you go back in some of my broadcasts, way back when I first started, you have to go down to the bottom, but it's about 220 broadcasts back. I did a 3-day series on James Coup Papa Bell and talked about me knowing him and visiting him and his wife, Clara Bell, and some wonderful things like that. But you got to go back and listen to those. It's way back there. But it was James Coup Papa Bell. So, all right. And let's see. I guess that's about it, guys. All right, then. Okay. Well, I guess that does it for me. I'm a trumpet player. And so a lot of times when I go out to speak, I do play my trumpet. Maybe I'll play Take Me Out to the Ball Game. But I'm going to play some things at my church this weekend. So I got to go practice. Because nothing worse than to hit a sour note when you're a solo performer. All right. That's not good. All right. So, guys, thank you for everybody joining in. I'll be back tomorrow. And we'll have another edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. And I'm just looking ahead, guys, and I see some wonderful stuff here. And it's going to be fun tomorrow. It's going to be fun. I'm looking at some of the different things. So if you hit the subscribe, you'll get a live thing when I come on, all right? So thank you, Kentucky and Indianapolis and the guy from Chile and everywhere you joined in, all right? Thank you, guys. Have a nice evening, and I will see you again real soon. Bye.